I'm going to introduce the Oculus Quest to you today and how you can get started with development in Unity with it. So first off, let me introduce what the Oculus Quest is. The Oculus Quest is Oculus's newest standalone virtual reality headset. It came out just earlier this May of 2019. What stands apart from other headsets is that it is a 6 degrees of freedom fully standalone headset. It runs completely on its own hardware. Graphics are generated from the headset itself. It does not have any wires or anything, just the headset and 2 controllers. What that means though is that it also does not have the same PC hardware that's required to run VR on a PC headset. Normally PCs, especially very powerful PCs, are required to run VR because it has to generate two images for your eyes, so it has to be able to generate about twice as much as you would expect in a regular video game. So that means that the graphical power is not as strong in the Quest, and that's something you need to take into account if you're going to develop for it, so that means you have to make good usage of your assets. If you know how to do this, then of course you can do that and you can do a lot of testing, but for now I would recommend using low poly models and other easy to render assets for your project. But with that in mind though, you have the complete freedom of being able to use this absolutely anywhere that has some space and good enough lighting. So and it also means that being 6 degrees of freedom means that unlike a headset that you would see like a phone strapped to your head, the 6 degrees of freedom means that, like a PC headset, the world does not just revolve around your head. Essentially, when you move in the real world, you will move in the virtual space as well, like on the right side here. This means that games like Beat Saber, for example, are possible because you can grab out and reach for things. It can track where your hands are in the real world. So if that's something you need for your game or your app, then I would highly recommend the Quest because it's super easy to show off to people and can make good usage of the tracking like this. The tracking is done with these cameras on the side, so it can map your space around you and tell essentially exactly where you are in the real world and map that to the game. And most PC headsets require outside tracking being strapped to the walls, except for the new Oculus Rift S, which also has has inside-out tracking like the Oculus Quest. We want to move on to how do I even start developing for this. So we develop in Unity. You will probably be learning about Unity using Pluralsight or other assets that are available to you, but this is specifically on how to get the Quest running in Unity. So first thing is that the Quest uses Android as its operating system. So it's like a phone, and it uses Android. That's why you need to be able to develop for Android on your computer. So on the lab computers, this shouldn't be an issue, but if it is, make sure to go to this website and follow these instructions to update your Android SDK manager and Java, since Java is the language used in Android. And after that's ready, you can go on to Unity. Now Unity nowadays is actually Unity Hub, and it contains you can install different versions of the Unity editor. We have lots of different versions on here right now, but it really doesn't matter for the most part as long as it's a more recent one, such as 2019. The only thing I recommend is that you don't switch your Unity version mid-project, as that can cause certain problems. But you can just go to add, you can add the latest release, and just make sure you stick with it. From there, you can go to the projects area and you can add a new project. So we're going to add a new project. So I already created one, but what you will do is you'll be able to create one here with, and let's call it Test Quest. And I made a folder on the desktop called Test Quest. That's where all your stuff is going to go. But I would recommend just creating a new folder, say on the desktop. That's fine with the name of your project. And as you can see, the path already exists because I already created it. But you will want to select 3D. And once you've clicked Create, just wait a little bit of time for Unity to create your project, and you should see something like this. So I'm not going to go into detail about how Unity works, but the things that you should know, that when you're wanting to add VR support, you need to take into account your assets. Normally you should just see scenes right here. A scene is like a room. You can have multiple scenes in your entire game or app, right? It's kind of like a level 1, level 2, level 3, and so on. It's where you keep your specific levels, so to speak. And this assets folder is actually on, so if we created Quest Test, right, on the desktop. In your projects, you'll see assets, library, and all of this. You only need to worry about assets for now. So you can see that this is where this comes from. What you need first is to download some new assets that make running and developing for VR possible. So the first one is Oculus integration. You should see it right here. I've already gone ahead and imported it, but you will see a button here. It says import. Continue to click yes if it asks to upgrade and other things, and then just click import all, and you will see it all being imported. Just wait a little bit, and then you should see it in your assets folder. And then we need one more asset if you so choose to, but it makes it much easier if you're learning how to do this. It's called VRTK, or Virtual Reality Toolkit. This is actually an asset that's been endorsed by Oculus, and they now actually use in their new official Unity tutorials for VR. This is super helpful because it can help you with taking care of very common features in VR, such as teleporting, grabbing, and other things that you would want to do. So like with the Oculus package, we need to click import. And so as a reminder, this Oculus package here is designed to work with technically any of Oculus's headsets. So this is why it makes it easier to develop also for, say, the Oculus Rift as well. So next up, we're going to just create a simple scene. So let's go under Scenes and go to Create Scene. We will call it Test. And here we just need to create a simple floor. So normally every scene comes with a main camera. We don't need that because we're going to be using a camera for VR. So now that we have VRTK and Oculus, what we can do is we can search for assets easily this way. We're going to search for something called SDK Manager. This is under, as you can see, under VRTK. What this does is it stands in, oops, we want the prefab here. What it does is it stands in for various types of headsets. You could consider this to act like kind of like your head or your headset. So First off, let's work on the build settings. So this is to allow it to be made for Quest natively. So we'll go to Android, and we're going to click Switch Platform. Now this can take some time, but what it does is it formats all the resources optimally for a mobile device, in this case particularly Android. Once it's done, we need to change the settings a little bit. So we need to start here, and I would recommend ASTC for compression, and you can see on here whether your Quest is connected or not. Make sure it's connected at least via the charge cable. That's a USB 2. But you can also charge it, but you can also do it by the USB 3 that we use for the Oculus Link. And then what we need to do is go into player settings, and under player settings we can change our company name. Maybe it's the name of your group. We'll call it Test Quest Group. And the product name is what it's going to be called when you are trying to see it in the headsets. And then you can just give it a version, doesn't really matter. And from there, so you want to make sure we have virtual reality supported, specifically for Oculus. For Oculus Quest, we want to go with gamma lighting. Let's see, uncheck Auto Graphics API and click on Vulkan and remove that, as this doesn't support, Quest doesn't support Vulkan. And then just wait. Next, we need to change the minimum API level here from API level 16 to 23. And I don't think we have to change anything else there. Next, we want to make sure that we actually use the OVR camera rig from the Oculus asset that we had downloaded earlier. So let's search that up. It's OVR camera rig. So this is normally what you can use even without VRTK. This is a representation this is a representation of the camera of the headset and the controllers. And in here we have our left hand anchor and right hand anchor, which represent where our hands are, and the center eye anchor is representation of where the headset is, and the whole thing, the tracking space of where we all are along with our play space. So in here, let's add some custom controllers. It'll be called OVR controller prefab. So this is a nifty prefab that, depending on the controller that you're using, will actually change its model to look like your actual controllers. So what we want here instead is L touch. That's a left touch controller. That's what the Quest uses. And we want another one right under here for right hand. And we're going to do the same, but R touch. Make sure that you only have just this. And then let's try them out. So we got our controllers, but you'll notice that we are stuck in the ground. That's because we're set to eye level. So we just need to make sure that we go here and change it to floor level. Make sure this here is for Quest. That means that this position represents the actual position of like our floor. So your head will be at the correct spot if you do this. Woohoo! Okay, so now that we've got that working, let's try building it and sending it to our Quest so it can run on there without any wires. So now that we have our player settings ready, and make sure the running device is on Oculus Quest, click Run and Build. So in your project file, you need to make a name for this APK. That's an Android package that's kind of like an exe file. It's a standalone file that you can run on an Android device. So let's just call it test.apk. It doesn't really matter because it'll be sent to our Quest. It'll detect your Quest if it's plugged in. Okay, so after it finishes, you can actually just put on your headset and it should be running automatically. But if not, just go to Library, and on the left side, go to Unknown Settings or Unknown Sources. If you don't see that, that means that developer mode hasn't been activated. So developer mode can be activated just by going onto the Oculus Quest app on the phone that's associated with the headset. In this case, it would be Brady's phone, since he owns the Mixed Reality Lab account for Oculus. And again, this is just a matter of looking it up if you need the specific details. But once they're connected, you can just go into Settings, More Settings, and toggle Developer Mode on from the phone. And as long as that's on, just make sure that when you connect next time, it might ask for permissions to connect to your device. Just select OK. And yeah, under Unknown Sources, look for the name you gave under player settings. So it should be it should be something like Test Quest or something under that list. All right, and if you did it right, yeah, you should be playing your game right now. So that is really all the settings that you need in order to get something up and running. So if you wanted to start using VRTK to interact with these things, one thing that you need to do is connect your controllers, aka the aliases, to the scripts. So let's do that by going to one of these example scenes under VRTK. This is a really helpful example scene that helps you with interactions such as grabbing. And as you can see here, they're using the same SDK manager here. They just made another parent object, but essentially what you need is some sort of object like this, a left controller script alias and a right controller script alias. What these do is they're like stand-ins for your left and right controllers. When you go to your SDK manager, it'll ask you for script aliases here, and normally if it's empty, these will be empty. But as you can see, these are connected to left and right controller aliases. All you got to do is drag these in to there, and that lets the SDK manager know that these are stand-ins for the left and right controllers, in which you can put a bunch of different scripts. I don't have time to go into a lot of detail about all these, but I would encourage you to look at these example scenes themselves for things that you want, such as locomotion, so teleporting, etc., and look at what kind of scripts they added to the script aliases. In this scene, for example, they actually added extra hands, so that when you press B, for example, these hands will show up, because VRTK normally doesn't have the hands in the prefabs as prefabs in the SDK manager. So that's one way to also abstract your hands from the actual SDK manager. But for Oculus Quest, this doesn't really matter. So you can put it in either the actual SDK itself, in here, the left-hand anchor, right-hand anchor, like we did before, or you can put it under the script aliases. And other than that, I would just make sure that you've got all of this taken care of. Make sure it's Gear VR. The actual objects are all accounted for and linked to their respective prefabs. And then just make sure that this is at floor level in Quest like before, and you should be good to go. Anyway, there's a lot of complexities to this, but I would just recommend that you try rebooting if there's issues, both Unity and then maybe Oculus, etc. And make sure that Oculus is on if you are going to be previewing through a Rift or a Quest or Link. And I think that's everything. So I hope that this was helpful, and good luck on your projects.